Hello guys, welcome back to another video, and today is going to be part 3 of the Brother in Arms expansion card review. So a whole bunch of new cards have been revealed since the last video. The expansion is coming out in just 8 days now on June 27th, and pre-order is live. You can everybody who's currently having an account is going to be getting a couple of packs for free anyways. So whether you're saving gold, you're getting the pre-order, whatever it is, I think everybody's getting pretty excited for this expansion, but there's still the question of what exactly is going to be in it, because there's still some cards that have not been revealed, and a whole bunch of cards that have just recently been revealed. So in this video, I will be giving my thoughts on the cards that have been revealed since the last video and now. So with that, let's get into it.
What a performance there by J King.
J King, full plot armor.
J King is pushing himself into the ranks of the legend.
J King is our world champion! J King 7! What? The back-to-back Cards world champion!
Alright, so first up we have Ancestral Call, which is a 6-cost Soviet order. Your units get +1 attack for each other unit in their front. So this is a pretty interesting card. Its wording might seem a bit confusing at first. So let's say you have 4 units in the support line and 5 units in the front line. This card is all units in the front line get +5 attack, all units in the support line get +4 attack. However, if you have like 3 and 2, then it's units in the front line get +2, units in the support line get +3. If you don't have control of the front line, this is 6 credits, gain your units in your support line gain attack equal to all the other units in the support line. So it's clearly meant to be a tokens card where you just have a lot of units in all of the support line and all of the front line. You just have trying to get 9 units on the board all the time. And in the situation where you have 5 tokens in the front line and you play this card, this is a 6-cost 25 damage, which is kind of insane. If you have 5 tokens in the front line that can attack, this is better than any other buff card. I guess it's like slightly worse than double Ura, but this is a single card. However, if you have 5 tokens in the front line that can attack, you've probably won the game like 95% of the time anyways. And this card is pretty terrible otherwise, because it does decrease quite quickly. Because if you have 4 units, instead of +25 attack, it is +16 attack, and then if you have 3 units, it's +9 attack. And yeah, this card at 6 cost, I understand why it's 6 cost, because you don't want somebody to just play No Surrender, get 4 units to the front line, and then win the game on the next turn. Because it is just an OTK. If you have No Surrender, get 4 tokens to the front line on turn 5, and then on turn 6 you play Ancestral Call, that's 20 damage. Now obviously, if they kill any of those tokens, it doesn't work. If they have a guard, it doesn't work. If they've healed, it doesn't work. If they have control of the front line and to begin with, it doesn't work. But the 5 into 6, it's decently strong for a limited and a standard. And I mean, let's be honest, most people who play tokens are at low ranks anyways. So 6 cost, I understand why it's 6 cost, however, I think that is going to stop it seeing play. I mean, like, maybe 1 copy, maybe. But what I like about this is it's more support for Soviet main tokens, because previously the problem with tokens, and I mean it still is kind of a problem with tokens, is that you can exclusively play it with US ally. You need the unity of strength, you need the alliance, you need the we can do it, you need the industrial might. But Soviets have slowly gotten draw, they've slowly gotten more and more of their own unit buffs, and what's pretty important about this card is it is permanent, unlike a lot of the other Soviet buffs that are not permanent. Like the 2 costs give your infantries +3 attack this turn, or the Patriotic Firestorm give units in your support line +2 attack this turn. A lot of the Soviet ones are temporary, but this is permanent, so maybe that makes a difference, but again, 6 cost, really expensive. Then we have the Tupolev, which is a 6-cost Soviet bomber, 5/5, pincer. It costs the enemy +2 credits to target or attack this unit. So this is pretty similar to the Privateer, which is the 5-cost 4/4 heavy armor 1 US bomber with just plain text. The enemy, it costs the enemy 2 credits to target or attack this unit. So that means any order that targets this, any deployment effect that targets this, or any unit attacking this, it will cost 2 additional credits. So essentially like Red Devils, but higher. And this is pincer, which means if you have another unit on the board, you can play this. You can get the effect on 2 units at once, and then they have to kill one of them to get rid of the other. And it's cool. It's also a 6-cost 5/5 bomber that does not immediately affect the board state in a nation that has essentially no support for that type of card. Because this is too big to fit into, like, Soviet air, I feel like. If it was a fighter, maybe. Because fighters are generally big, high-statted fighters with, like, a mid effect are going to be a lot better than big, high-statted bombers with a mid effect. Because bombers are just way easier to remove if you're behind on board. And, yeah, this just seems like a really win more card. I mean, if you get it in draft, you're probably going to be happy with it. If you open it in a pack and you have a small collection, you might be happy with it and play it around. I would be very surprised if we see this card run competitively. It just seems so greedy, and I feel like you just have better options in Soviets. Then we have Spearhead, which is another tokens, aggressive Soviets kind of card. It's a 2-cost order, destroy a friendly unit and adjacent units. So, 2-cost, destroy up to 3 units, friendly units. All of your other units get +X, where X is units destroyed. So, if you have 3 tokens in the support line, and you spearhead them for 2 credits, it's 2 credits, give all your units in the front line +3/+3, which is insane. And all it costs is killing 3 tokens that are in the support line and can't move up anyways, they can't attack anyways, they probably won once. So this is 2 credits +3/+3, that's pretty insane. Alliance is 5 credits +2/+2, and it's really good. However, just how big of a downside is the fact that you have to destroy your own units. Because it means if you don't have the front line, this card is essentially useless. Because, for example, if you're stuck in your support line, you can give 1 unit +3/+3. You can give 2 units +2/+2. Or you can give 3 units +1/+1. Depending on your positioning, but you also have to position for this. But I really like the fact that you do have to position for this, so if you are running this card, it does bring up some very interesting questions. And I actually think this is probably more likely to see play in a tokens deck. Maybe not immediately, but just in the future. I don't think tokens is going to be good. I'm just saying, I think this card has a lot of potential. I think this card is very, very interesting, but 2 credits give your units +3/+3. People will find a way to make this work. And again, this is just additional support for tokens outside of US ally, which I really, really like. And, I mean, I hope we see cards that let you summon tokens, a lot more tokens in this expansion, because I know we already have a lot of token summoning cards, and I don't think any of them are getting rotated, but at the same time, just the amount of, like, tokens you're going to consistently need. And a big problem with these is you do require control of the front line, which is not a guarantee in this meta at all. So, we'll have to see on Spearhead, but I definitely don't think this is trash. I've seen a lot of people just immediately dismiss this as a hot pile of garbage, one of the worst guides of the set. I disagree with that. Then we have a spicy one, which I helped reveal via Innocent Bubbles on the Cards Top Deckers channel. Very funny video. You should check it out. It is a 10-cost British order. It's an elite. So if you're thinking high expensive elites, especially high expensive elite orders, what do you have? You have Commonwealth, which is like a build your deck around it, kind of try to win the game card. You have To the Last Man, huge board clear. You have like Rule Britannia, big, massive game-winning buff. So what's Committed Crew going to be? Committed Crew is, until the end of turn, Spitfires in hand cost 0 to deploy, and to get +3/+3 when deployed. So this is a massive tempo boost. Like, if you play Committed Crew and you have 4 Spitfires in hand, that's probably going to be around 20 to 24 credits worth of Spitfires. So it's already gaining you 14 credits of tempo, plus 12/12 in stats, just pulled out of nowhere. However, that requires you to get to turn 10 with Committed Crew and 4 big vanilla Spitfires in hand, and not be dead, and also have no other units in your support like guarding or healing or doing anything, which is not really going to happen. Now, I'm not a huge fan of this card, specifically because I'm not a huge fan of Spitfires as an archetype. I think it's a very, very boring archetype. I think it's a very, very boring design at the moment because all the Spitfires, basically all the Spitfires are functionally vanilla fighters, just large vanilla fighters. And all of the cards that revolve around Spitfire synergy is just let you get out your large vanilla fighters quicker and buff the stats of your large vanilla fighters when they get them onto the board. And that is just not very interesting at all. If the deck becomes good, it's just going to win because you slam in large vanilla fighters quickly, like quick enough to beat other decks. And if it's not going to win, it's because you're doing absolutely nothing and you get rolled over. And Committed Crew just fits exactly into that. I mean, it's just a massive win more card. It's just a massive, like, I win the game on the spot if you don't have, like, a handful of cards, like, To the Last Man, ISU, or Winter Warfare ISU, Schwalbe. Like, this card just gets absolutely blown out by a specific card in basically every control deck. However, that requires them to have that specific card, like a Monsoon Rot supply shortage kind of thing. And, yeah, I mean, there's not realistically a way you can combine this with Patton to give them all Blitz as well. I guess your best bet would be doing a US-Britain Spitfire deck with Allied Research Effort, where you pick the order to try to get Committed Crews. That seems terrible. I don't know exactly what deck you would run this in. Traditionally, I feel like Spitfire, the best Spitfire decks have been Italian Ally, just because if you slam like a 7/7 fighter on turn 5 and you're at like 2 health because you're playing against a Jagro, you put Maelstrom on that and maybe you come back and win. So, problem with that, Maelstrom's being rotated, so now do you run Reichsbank to try to cheese out a Committed Crew early? Do you run US Ally because you get the Spitfire that draws, plus you get ramp, so you can ramp into Committed Crew, you can ramp into your Spitfires. However, important to note is this says Spitfires in hand cost 0 to deploy. I'm not actually entirely sure if this counts Spitfires you draw after playing Committed Crew. Like, I'm not entirely sure how this works with the 7 cost to draw a fighter from your deck, Spitfire in US. Is this just a passive for the rest of this turn? Spitfires in your hand cost 0, or is it this when you play this card, it makes Spitfires currently in your hand cost 0? Not sure. Classic cards moment where the wording on a card is very, very unclear on how it actually works, and there's like, because everything in the game works differently than other things with the exact same ability, it's really hard to like tell on past precedent how this is going to work, but that would be a pretty big difference in how viable US Ally is. But anyways, that's enough about Committed Crew. You're not going to see this card a lot, and when you do, you're going to be mad about it. But it might be really fun to play with this card for yourself. Then we have a much better card, which you probably will see a lot more of, the MEBF 109G. It is a 3-cost, 2-operation German fighter, 3/3 stats. So, not great already, just off the bat. The 3-cost, 2-operation, 3/3 fighter body, not good at all, and Germany has essentially 0 air support. So, this has better be one insane effect. And the effect is Pincer. When this unit attacks and destroys a unit, gain a credit and to draw a card. Which is absolutely insane. This is basically like Pincer have like half a Martyr, half a Nachschub, which is like 2 of the best cards in like any German aggro tempo mid-range deck. And this is Pincer onto it, so you can do this immediately. If you put this onto a unit that then can attack and kill something, you essentially like pay for part of the cost of playing this. And if it sticks around, if you get 2 triggers out of this, you're probably just going to win the game instantly. Like, that is just so insane. You're getting 2 free credits, 2 free draw. That is crazy. Plus, it's Pincer, and we've seen, and will be seeing, a bit of Pincer support. And, I mean, this is just a crazy card without Pincer. So, with Pincer support, I think this card could be very, very good. And I do want to rein in the hype a little bit. I do think this is worse than Martyr, and this is substantially worse than Nachschub. And the question is, how many of these types of cards do you want to have in a deck? I don't think you run this in Heinz. I think just because it's not a tank, you already have to run so many other cards, I don't think you run this in Heinz. However, we have seen Heinz, as we know it, take a more mid-range form with less hardcore tank synergy, and just some tank synergy, and then some just good mid-range units. Maybe if we move away from the 4 Panzer A4 Greyhound triple Blitzkrieg version of Heinz. Maybe this will make its way into the deck. I don't see that happening, but it could happen. But I think this is going to be a really solid choice for any German main or ally mid-range deck. I don't think you would run this in US frontline because, again, it just doesn't really have synergy as a fighter, but maybe. We will see. Maybe in some sort of mid-range combined arms joint operation type of deck. Then we have the 91st Astrocon, a 2-cost, 1-operation Soviet infantry, 3/3 stats. So already 2-cost, 3/3 stats. That's pretty good. I mean, it's an infantry, but 2-cost, 3/3 stats, very strong. The text, when this unit gets a pincer effect, give it +1/+2. Which is absolutely insane. This card can snowball so quickly. So if you play this on turn 2, it's a 3/3, so it's already very difficult to remove. I mean, obviously, Sudden Strike is always going to remove this, no matter how big it is. So that's just Sudden Strike aside. You play this on turn 2, it's very difficult to remove. And then on turn 3, let's say you play the Jaeger Regiment to give this -1 operation cost. So now it is a 2-cost, 4/5, 0-op that's moving to the front line. And then you also play the guy who gives it ambush. So now suddenly it is a 2-cost, 5/7 with ambush. 0-op, that's moving to the front line. And then, I don't know, just throw on another one of those. Or you wait a turn and then you throw on the pincer when this attacks and kills a unit, draw a card, get a credit. Or any of the other solid pincer cards. The pincer card that when this attacks, give all your other active pincer cards +1/+1. And suddenly it's like a 6/9 and you're absolutely destroyed your opponent. And it's just completely game over right off the bat. However, it's very slow. It does not have Blitz, and it doesn't have Guard. It doesn't heal you. If you're going second, like if your opponent just gets a Red Devils to the front line already, this card's super slowed down immediately, and then it's super vulnerable to things like Sudden Strike. However, what's really good about this card is it has to pull out your opponent's removal. They really have to kill this card with their removal, because if not, you can snowball so quickly. Like, you could just play 3 pincer 1-cost pincer guys on this dude, and then he's just immediately a 6/9. That's kind of insane for a 2-cost standard unit. This is going to be the card that makes or breaks the pincer deck as a meta deck. Just how good is this going to be? Then we have a very interesting card, 4-cost Soviet order called Enemy at the Gates. All units get +2 attack and are dealt 2 damage. So this is sort of like Root Out in a way. This is sort of like Winter Warfare in a way. This card can be used in a couple different ways, and it's very interesting. So, +2 attack and 2 damage to everything. You can use this offensively, where your units have more than 2 health, and you play this to give your units +2 attack and then attack with them immediately. Maybe you even do this with some sort of self-damage combination with 456ths. Maybe you do this in the repair deck, that you do US-Soviet repair, and you do Enemy at the Gates to damage all your units, give them +2 attack, and then you repair them to get even more bonuses. Or, you can use this as a control card, as a 4-cost to deal 2 damage to all enemy units, which is pretty good, quite good, with the pretty important downside of, if any survive, they get +2 attack. So, it's... With that being said, it's a very, very versatile card, but it also just feels a little bit bad. In, like, the repair deck, it feels a little bit expensive for what you're trying to do. Would you really rather that over just a Winter Warfare repair all your guys? And then in a control deck, the question becomes just how bad is the giving +2 attack to any units that survive? It's very meta-dependent. I think it's very possible we see this card in the future. Do not get me wrong, I think it is very possible that this card will see play, but I'm kind of doubting it's going to see immediate play right out the gate. I don't think anybody is thinking that this card is cracked. And I think you'll have to really convince people that it is worth running this card, especially in a control deck, because also, like in a control deck, you're going to have your own guards and stuff. However, I mean, +2 attack on like a Bryansk regiment, not actually bad. Like in Soviet control, most of your units are high health, low attack, so trading 2 health for 2 attack, you're probably going to be fine with that. Again, it's just the downside of, are you killing all of your opponent's units? Because if not, That's very, very bad. Then we have a card that I'm very excited for, the 24th Cavalry Regiment. If you missed 32nd, if you missed finding double 32nd in your opening hand and complaining, oh my goodness, I'm just out at draw now, get ready for 24th Cavalry, because it's even slower than 32nd, which means you are even more likely to find multiple copies of them before you find, you naturally draw through all of them, because it is a 2-cost, 3/1 Japanese Infantry Destruction. Draw a 24th Cavalry Regiment from your deck. It's not a deployment card, which means you have to play it, and then it needs to die, and then you draw another one, and then you need to play that, and then it needs to die, and then you draw another one, and then you need to play that, and then it needs to die, and then you draw the last one. And all of that has to happen without you drawing any of the other ones naturally, which is a lot less likely. However, very, very important, this card has Blitz, which makes it so much better than 32nd as a standalone unit. And also, it's Japanese, so I mean, US, maybe they'd want a 3/1. Like, if this card was American, they'd probably run it. However, in Japan, where you have cards like Signal Regiment, where you have cards like Matsumoto, which is just going to be Signal Regiment number 2 and 3 in your deck, this card is great. You are absolutely fine having a 3/1 infantry, because if you're playing against frontline and they have their Greyhounds, they have their Red Devils on the front line, you're just going to start spamming out 24th Cavalry Regiments, and you just destroy their frontline control. This card is so good against decks that already have the frontline against you. Jaguar Mirrors, where they're, well, I guess they can't pull Befelswagons anymore because it's been rotated, but Jaguar Mirrors, where they have a bunch of units in the front line, especially Heinz, especially US frontline, where they get these higher health units that traditionally stop the bicycles, the cavalry regiments. This 24th Cavalry Regiment with the 3 attack and blitz and destruction, draw another 3 attack blitz, going to be great. And this is just a free card you put into the destruction effect deck. You will absolutely run 4 copies of this in the destruction effect deck alongside 4 copies of Akita and alongside 4 copies of Mito Regiment. These are going to be the bread and butter of the destruction deck, and this is why I think destruction is going to be tier 1. Maybe tier 2 at first, until people find the best exact deck. However, I think there's a 0% chance we do not see Destruction Japan as a tier 1 deck before the next expansion. This deck has so much potential, and a big part of it revolves around this card, 24th Cavalry. And again, it's a standard, so you get 4 copies in your deck. Obviously, you're going to want 4 because it draws itself. But also, it's a very cheap card to craft, and you can just put this into any Jago deck. It doesn't even need to be Destruction themed. It's just a solid card. And then we have 101st Infantry Regiment, a 3-cost German infantry, 2/5 body, kind of weird, with Pincer, gets +1/+1 when this unit attacks. So, this is going to be another very, very good Pincer card, and Pincer is absolutely looking like it's going to be Soviet-German or German-Soviet, because this card is just really, really good. I mean, this card, as a 2/5, kind of slow. If this card attacks once on its own, 3/6, that's a very good stat line. A 3-cost 3/6, very, very good. And it's Pincer, so it can play it on something that can immediately attack, so it's can give that +1/+1 on the turn you play it. And if that's on an Astrocon, it gives that +1/+1. Sorry, it gives that +1/+2, and then it attacks and gets an additional +1/+1. So this Pincer deck is going to snowball really hard. It's going to be somewhat Alpine-like, where if you let them keep units on the board, they're going to snowball in stats so much. But if you could wipe all of them, then suddenly you're going to be having to play Pincer cards on empty boards and not get the Pincer effect. And the stats are going to come slower, and if they can't attack right away, you can just pick off the weaker ones, get rid of the Pincer effects, break it down. So it's going to be a lot like Alpine, just in terms of how it plays. I mean, I think it's going to be slightly more interesting than Alpine, because both players have to make way more important decisions about which Pincer cards do you play on which cards, how do you order attacking, moving things, and especially if you don't have a non-Pincer unit on the board, or a non-Pincer unit in hand to play on the board, like, which card do you want to get out of your hand and not trigger its Pincer effect? And then on the flip side, for the opponent, you have to figure your way through this web of different Pincer effects, in what things do you remove first. I really hope they update, like, graphically how Pincer is represented, because I feel like it could start to get really confusing if the opponent has like 5 or 6 different Pincer cards on the board, trying to figure out which things have targeted which things. Like, I don't know, maybe if you hover over a Pincer card, it shows like some sort of link between it and everything that it's been pincered with, just for easy representation. Something like that. But this really cool card, you'll probably see it in the Pincer deck. Then we have Maelstrom, which is an 8-cost German order. Deal 4 damage to each non-veteran unit. So this is a lot like Harbor Bombing. This is a lot like Winter Offensive. Probably more like Winter Offensive than Harbor Bombing. However, this does not hit HQs. Importantly, this is not a burn card, which is very good. If this hit HQs, I'd be concerned. And this is each non-veteran unit. So obviously you could run this in a veteran unit deck, where you want a bunch of veteran units on the board, and then this is just an 8-cost, deal 4 damage to enemy units, which is pretty good. Importantly, this is going to help Germany's matchup into frontline a lot. That was sort of a big weakness of German control, is this frontline deck, because there's just so many 4/4s, and Germany does not have any good AoEs, and like, especially with a Redoubt being rotated. But Maelstrom now, Maelstrom's going to be so good into frontline. It kills 5th Rangers, it kills Shermans, it kills literally every unit in the deck other than like a buffed 5th Rangers. Incredibly powerful. Now obviously it hits your own stuff too, because most likely most of your units are not going to be veteran. And then there's the worry that your opponent is playing a veteran deck, or just playing a bunch of veteran cards, like maybe they have a Pathfinders on the board or something. Maelstrom will not be killing that. However, I fully expect we will see this card see play. This is a very good card in Germany, a nation that really needed a card like this. Then we get to P-51B, which, let's talk about it. So it's a 7-cost, 2 operation cost US fighter. It's a 6/6 in stats. With Destruction, give your units +2/+2 and draw 2 cards. So this is essentially like the only destruction effect in US. So that US card, Fog of War, I'm remembering the name as, which was the trigger a destruction effect, on a unit as if it was yours, and then remove it if it was an enemy's unit. You can Fog of War this P-51 to trigger it without destroying it, so the P-51 will become an 8/8, and all your units get +2/+2, and then you draw 2 cards. Very, very powerful destruction effect. However, do you want to be running Fog of War on a single destruction effect unit? Absolutely not. And again, if this is the only US destruction unit, why did you print Fog of War? But that's another discussion. Fog of War is... I could even be misremembering the name of the card. It might not even be Fog of War. Yeah, it's absolutely not Fog of War. Fog of War is the 4-cost British order. I'm blanking on the name of the card, but it's one of the new expansion cards. I talked about it in video 1. I really do not like that card, and I also really do not like Partnership, which is, I think, going to be the primary way you see this card. Because remember when I said Partnership was a 3 cards out of 15, so a 20% chance to get something good? Well, this is another US Elite, and this, if you get on turn 5 off of Partnership, going to be very, 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 very good. Incredibly good. Insanely good. Which means that Partnership is now up to a 4 out of 16, which means it's up to a 25% chance to get a game-winning card. Which, a 1 in 4 to win the game is pretty good for a 5-cost card that you can run 3 copies of in your deck. And it's not like the other 3, it's not like the other 3/4 chance is absolutely atrocious. It's not like you're going to lose the game if you get a Long Tom on turn 5. Or a Black Widow on turn 5. Like, the average US Elite card costs, like, I think almost 6. And it's a 5-cost card. So, on average, you are going to be getting value out of this card, and 1/4 of the time you're going to win the game. But anyways, this is not... we're not talking about Partnership, we're talking about P-51B. Is there any way that this card sees play outside of Partnership? I think it's too slow for mid-range. I think it's too slow for any sort of repair deck. I think you run this in ramp. It's just a good card with good payoff, and it doesn't have an immediate effect when it hits the board, which makes it a little weak. Generally in ramp, you want things that have deployment effects, like the Adventure, like the B-17, where you spend all these credits to get all of these credits, and then you want things that immediately affect the board, because your opponent will have been playing units this whole time that you've been playing ramp cards. This does not do that. However, it is a fighter, which is really, really good, because it stops bombers, and the effect, the destruction effect, is very, very powerful against other control decks. It's very, very powerful. It's not going to be like the first card you play. You're not going to play War Machine into Hour of Need into P-51B, probably, because you have no other units on board, and 6 attack, or 6 health, can be removed pretty easy. It's very vulnerable to bounce, and if it is removed, you're not getting too much out of it. However, I think you would still absolutely run this card in ramp, and then you just take out one of like the pretty crappy late game cards like Mass Deployment. I don't know why people run that card. But anyways, P51B, I think it will have a bit of a splash. I think it will see play. I don't think it's completely garbage, but I don't think it's going to be too... I think its biggest effect on the competitive meta is going to be off of partnership, because, dear lord, why is that a card? Then we get to the 179th Tomahawks, the only veteran card we have in this video. It is a 7-cost US infantry, 1 operation cost, 4/3. So it's a 7-cost 4/3 infantry. This card is terrible. However, it has the destruction effect. Add a copy of this unit to your support line, it becomes a veteran. And the veteran version of this is a 7-cost 4/3 infantry with the text at the start of your turn, destroy a random enemy unit. This is a very, very, very powerful effect, and it means that if you play Tomahawks, your opponent essentially has to remove both versions of it at once. It is resistant to board clears. Like, if you play Tomahawks, I mean, first of all, it just doesn't even die to Maelstrom since it's a veteran unit. So it can't be removed by Maelstrom, which is pretty annoying. But if, say you play Tomahawks, and then your opponent plays Carpet Bombing, you now get the veteran Tomahawks in your support line, which will just destroy a random enemy unit when they end their turn. So it is a very, very powerful effect. However, 7-cost 4/3, it is not that hard to deal 3 damage twice on 1 turn. And this doesn't have any immediate effect, it doesn't have any immediate impact, so you're essentially playing like a 7-cost 4/6 a lot of the time. Now, obviously, it's slightly better than that, because you can't, like, hammer it, for example, or just play 1 lion for a day. But it's essentially a 7-cost 4/6 in a lot of circumstances that, at the start of your next turn, do something. That is not that great. Now, obviously, you can combine this with things that trigger veteran effects immediately, like the 5-cost US order that makes the unit become veteran immediately, and if you play that, this becomes a 6/7 at the start of your turn. Destroy a random enemy unit. Not terrible, but you're still spending 12 credits to get that. Which, 2 cards and 12 credits to get that, not good. So I don't think Tomahawk is going to see a ton of play. Except, and again, similar to the last 7-cost US or unit we looked at, the P51B, this can come out of Seaborne Invasion, which means Seaborne Invasion is the 9-cost US elite order. Summon 6 attack worth of retreat all enemy units from the front line, and then summon 2 US infantry units with the combined attack of 6. And Tomahawk has 4 attack, and it's an infantry, which means you can get Tomahawk and a unit with 2 attack, and there's a lot of US infantry with 2 attack, which means you're going to see Tomahawk out of Seaboard Invasion a decent chunk of the time. And that is, I mean, Seaboard Invasion is a card that has seen play. It's a card that will continue to see play. It's a card that has not been rotated. It's a card that has not been changed anytime recently, and when it was changed, it didn't make it any less random. And you're going to be getting Tomahawks off of it, and that's really, really dumb. Yeah, I don't know why US is just, like, US cards are just becoming the, like, really, really terrible, but, like, sometimes you get them randomly out of, like, good cards, and then they just are cracked because of that. I hate this identity for US. I don't hate Tomahawks as a card design. I hate Seaboard Invasion as a card design, and I've been complaining about it for years. I'm sure you can find posts I've made in, like, 2021 complaining about how this card limits design space. And this is exactly the type of design space it's limiting. You can't release a card like this if Seaboard Invasion is in the game. However, 1939 is going to release it anyways. And hopefully they will eventually change Seaboard Invasion, because it's so dumb. At least that one's not going to have as nearly as big of a competitive impact as Partnership, because 1, Seaboard Invasion is going to see less play than Partnership, and 2, you're getting this one effect out of it way less often than you're getting something good out of Partnership, and 3, getting this out of Seaboard Invasion is not nearly as good as getting one of the 4 good, large, powerful elites out of Partnership. So, again, Really, really sucks. But anyways, let's move on to the King's Own Scottish. It's a 2-cost British infantry, 1/5, with pincer. Damage dealt to this unit is dealt to its pincer partner instead. I think this is the first time we've seen the term pincer partner, which I find very amusing. I don't know why. Probably because it's an alliteration. Pincer partner. It's very fun to say. I encourage you to do it on your own. And how good is this card? Not that good. I saw a couple people whose immediate reaction to this was, oh my goodness, you run this in air. You play it on your swordfish, and then they can't kill your swordfish because all of the damage gets absorbed by King's Own Scottish. However, if you think about that for about 2 seconds, you realize, oh wait, no, that means they can just, like, hammer your King's Own Scottish and your swordfish dies. That means they can, it doesn't really do it. Like, you just hit the King's Own Scottish for 3 and the swordfish dies, and you basically just, like, turn your swordfish into a gladiator for 2 cost. Not that great. I mean, I guess it means you could, like, play this on the swordfish and then attack into a fighter for however much damage, and then King's Own Scottish is the one that dies. Seems pretty bad. Now, obviously, you could run this in some sort of British ally or British main pincer deck. However, there's not a lot of British pincer cards, and they're not that good. They're not that interesting. They're kind of expensive, and I don't think this effect is particularly powerful. So I don't think King's Own Scottish is going to see a lot of play, and by a lot I mean any play. But it's an interesting card at the very least. It's not just a vanilla. Then we have the 1,357th Rifles, the 5-cost Soviet Infantry, a 3/7, with the text, when this unit takes damage or is fully repaired, it gets +2 attack. So essentially this is just going to be a massive, massive, massive infantry. And how good is a 5-cost massive, massive, massive infantry? Not that good. I mean, I feel like you would just rather run the pincer guy. The pincer guy is just going to be like a, however much, like a 7/7 for less credits. Yeah, I don't think you run this card in, like, the repair deck. The payoff just does not seem good enough. It's so slow. It doesn't have guard. It doesn't have the blitz. It doesn't have any other interesting effects. And its effect does not gain health. And 7 health, well, it's a lot. It is just going to die. Like, your opponent is just going to remove this if it becomes a threat. So, yeah, this is just going to be like an all-right draft card and, like, an all-right low-budget card, and I think that's about it. Then we have the Premier BFL, which is a 6-cost 5/5 French infantry. Deployment, deal damage to the enemy HQ equal to the number of non-French units you control, which is pretty interesting, and this is a limited. So it's a French burn card, and France does have a couple burn cards. However, it's a French burn card that can't really be run in Resistance, and it absolutely cannot be run in, like, the German-France, like, Order countermeasure burn deck. And so the question becomes, what deck do you want to run this in? Well, we've seen a decent amount of support for, like, sort of French mid-rangey decks over the years, and we definitely, as we will see later, we will see France is getting a bunch of other French mid-rangey support cards that you potentially might want to do with, like, a US-France deck. We've seen people try to do that with Rima back when, before the Rima nerf. However, in that deck, how good is deal damage to the enemy HQ equal to the number of non-French units you control? Like, let's say this card on average does, like, 4 damage. I have no idea. That feels like maybe it's a little high, even. I mean, like, 3 might be more fair, but let's say, on average, this is just a 6-cost 5/5 deal 4 damage to the enemy HQ deployment effect. I don't think you would run that. Even if it was American, I don't think you would run that. Why would you pick France as an ally to run that? However, there is going to be people who are going to do funny things with tokens, where they're playing, like, French ally tokens, and they have 8 tokens on the board, and then they play Premier BFL and deal 8 damage to the opponent. And even then, that just sounds worse than playing, like, I don't know, Ancestral Call. Like, if you have 8 tokens on the board, why wouldn't you just play one of your buff cards rather than this garbage? And it's an interesting effect. I don't want to complain. It is a very interesting effect. It's a French card, and it doesn't support any existing archetypes at all. And I don't even know what archetype exists that would want to run this. Like a Japan burn? Maybe. but it's like 6 cost. You have to have units on the board by turn 6 in a burn deck. That doesn't seem possible. So yeah, I don't have any idea what deck this is going to fit into, but it's a card. And maybe in the future we'll get more cards to support this sort of archetype. Then we have Duty is a Mountain, which is a very interesting card. It's a 6-cost Japanese order. Give your units destruction effects on this unit, trigger an extra time. So Japan has its fair share of orders that give units effects. Now there's the Yamato, which is give all your units destruction effect, deal 2 damage to the enemy HQ. There's the give all your units destruction effect or draw a card. Now there's Duty as a Mountain, which is give all your units destruction effect, trigger again. Now this is obviously this is meant to have synergy with a lot of the destruction effects we've seen in this set, especially like the jungle warfare. So if you have like, you play turn 4 Mito Regiment, and then you play turn 5 jungle warfare on Mito Regiment, and you deal 4 damage to the enemy HQ, and then you do turn 6 Duty as a Mountain, and then you do turn 7 another jungle warfare, and that's dealing what, like 12 damage to the enemy HQ, and then like they kill your Mito, and then the Mito does an additional like 12 damage to the enemy HQ. Pretty good. However, that requires you to play a Mito that doesn't get removed, and then Jungle Warfare on it that doesn't get removed, and then Duty is a Mountain on it, and then it gets removed. No, sorry, and then it's still not removed, and then you play a second Jungle Warfare on it, and then it gets removed. And also in the meantime, you have to not die. Which, obviously, that is not going to happen. I don't think Duty as a Mountain is going to be good enough to fit into the Destruction Effect deck, because it doesn't do anything immediately. Like, you play 6 cost, you want it to be doing something. Like, compare this to Yamato. So Yamato is all Japanese units deal 2 damage to the enemy HQ when they die. And that adds on to any existing destruction effects. Like Mito will get 2 destruction, deal 2 damage to the enemy HQ. Duty as a Mountain is 6 cost. Destruction effects on your units trigger again, but that requires them to already have destruction effects, so it's not all Japanese units, it's Japanese units with destruction effects. Well, units with destruction effects, I should say. And then that requires the destruction effects to be more than deal 2 damage to the enemy HQ. Or otherwise it's just a 6-cost Yamato. So I do not see this card seen play in an aggressive, burn-oriented destruction deck. I think people will play this card in the greediest decks you've ever seen in your life. I think people will play this card in, like, Japan's US ramp nonsense. I think people will play this card in the Soviet Japan Ultra Greed decks, where you have, like, T60 and 272nd on the board, and you play Duty as a Mountain, and you get 2 ISUs, you get 2 T34s to your hand, and your deck sucks because you're spending 6 cost to generate, like, value some of the time if you can stick units. And also, this requires the units not to be retreated. Yeah. It's an interesting card. Again, it's a very interesting card, and time will tell if a deck will come around that can run this card, because it is a very powerful effect. It's just cost 6 credits. Then we have 8th Marines, a 4-cost US infantry, 2 operation, with deployment, it's a 6/4. With deployment, deal 1 damage to adjacent units, they get +2 attack. So obviously, the intention of this, it's similar to a 10th Engineers, the 1/1 adjacent ground units get +2 attack. This does say adjacent units, so this can buff air units, can buff arties, can buff, obviously, like the tank and infantry. And then they get +2 attack. So you're essentially supposed to be playing this and then using the 2 additional attack for value, and you're supposed to play this in a repair deck, because this is also 4 credit, deal an American card that deals damage to your own units, so that you can repair them. And that's all neat. However, this card is still a 4-cost, 2 operation 6/4, which is not that good. I think it is possible that you play this in the repair deck. Not 3 copies, but I think it's possible you play 1 or 2 copies of this in the repair deck. Granted, I don't think the repair deck is going to be any better than Tier 3, just because from what we have seen, I don't think repair is going to be that good. But I think it's possible that you run this card in repair, despite... I've seen a lot of people just say, like, this card absolutely trash. This card easily could have been a 6/6. This card could have been 0 operation cost, and you still wouldn't play it. I disagree with that. I think people are sleeping on the power of this effect. Although, because again, this is a permanent effect. It doesn't matter if they kill the 6/4, doesn't matter if they move up to the front line, whatever. Permanent +2 attack. So I think people are undervaluing the effect. However, I think people are pretty accurately evaluating that a 4-cost 2 operation cost 6/4 is not that good. And the repair deck, not that good. So let's move on to Green Howards. A lot of people have been hailing this card as the replacement for Seaforth, which is getting rotated. It is a 4-cost 3/6 British Guard, 1 operation cost, with the text, draw 1 card when a unit becomes veteran. So, obviously, right off the bat, if we compare this to Seaforth, it has -1/-1 stats compared to Seaforth, which is pretty important. However, very, very big is it's just a permanent 3 attack. You can attack into units on your turn for 3. I think a 4-cost 3/6, that is a pretty standard body. We see the East Surrey 3-cost 2/6. First Rifles, obviously, the 4-cost 3/9. We don't talk about First Rifles, it's been rotated. 4-cost 3/6, very solid body. And how good is the effect? Draw a card when a unit becomes veteran. Now, you could play this with a bunch of veteran units in your own deck and try to draw a bunch of cards that way. I don't think you're going to do that. I don't think we've seen any particularly good British veteran cards yet. However, you play this, and it also triggers off of opponents' veteran cards. And I think you just play Green Howards because it's a good guard for its cost. It's good stats for its cost. It seems like a solid, all-around, okay card. And then people are going to be running veteran cards, whether it's the Dragon, it's just the new Japan key, the unit that's veteran if it's a 6/5, if it's the first one you've played this game. They're going to be playing Pathfinders. I'm sure there's like some other veteran cards that are going to be announced that people are going to play, and then of course maybe play against a veteran deck altogether. And it's just going to like make your opponent think about how they remove this. It might make them not play their veteran cards, or they might make them not trigger their veteran cards until this is off the board. And I mean, if this draws you 1 card, it's really good. A 4-cost 3/6 draw card guard. That is a solid card. That is a very good card. And it's not going to draw you a card in most games, but it's going to draw you a card some of the time, and I think that's just a really solid card. It's solid replacement for Seaforth. That is not nearly as strong as Seaforth, but that's perfectly fine because Seaforth was one of the best cards in the game. Seaforth was hilariously broken. So I think it's perfectly fine that this is just a solid replacement for it in control decks that bring it down to a more reasonable level. Then we have Diplomatic Attaché. This is a very interesting card. It's a 1-cost Japanese order. Deal 1 damage to target enemy, +1 for each previously played Diplomatic Attaché. So it's a standard. So the first one will deal 1 damage, the second one will deal 2 damage, the third one will deal 3 damage, and the fourth one will deal 4 damage. And if you're doing some nonsense, like with the 1-cost duplicate an order in Britain to get 5 or 6 copies of these, then they'll deal 5 and 6 damage. That seems unlikely. However, this can go HQ, or this can go into a unit, which is very, very important. You could run this in like a Japanese order buff deck, where the first one, like you can use this to take out cavalries and then 35Ts. Like you can play Diplomatic Attaché, kill a cavalry, then a second Diplomatic Attaché, kill a 35T, and then a third one to kill a Sendai, and then a fourth one to take out Signal Regiment. Really, really powerful, versatile card for 1 cost. Or if you're in a control deck, you can slam Kawanishi and do Diplomatic Attaché face to deal 3, 4, 5, 6 damage, which adds up to 18 damage burst, which pretty good. Or again, you can use that to target all units to wipe out a big board of units to stay alive. Very, very flexible card. The one problem with it is it doesn't draw your other Diplomatic Attachés. Obviously, if it did that, it would be absolutely insane. It would be broken. But it doesn't draw like Kamikaze does, and there is definitely situations where like you find your first Diplomatic Attaché on like turn 10, and you don't really want a 1-cost to deal 1 damage card on turn 10. And it requires you to run a ton of draw in your deck. And like, I don't know. It's very easy to imagine the really cool situations where you have this card. It's very difficult to imagine a actually functional competitive deck list that has this card in it. Because this is 4 card slots, and you need to also then run a ton of draw to make up for the fact that you're running 4 copies of a 1-cost order, which is not particularly immediately impactful. However, you know what type of deck this would be really good in? Unitless. Maybe one day we'll have a Japan unitless deck to rival that of the US-France unitless deck. But let's move on to Momentum, a 4-cost German order. Add 2 Panzer 1Bs to the front line if it is not controlled by the enemy. So Panzer 1B is one of the other cards that has been revealed in this expansion. I went over it in my last video. It is a 1-2 German tank with Veteran. That's another card that's going to be cool with Green Howard. However, it becomes Veteran when it attacks the enemy HQ, which means Green Howard's probably guided the enemy HQ, which means it's probably not triggered off of Panzer 1Bs. However, Panzer 1B, if you trigger the Veteran, then you get a second Panzer 1B into your hand. So it's sort of like an infinitely generating tank if you can attack the enemy HQ. So Momentum lets you get 2 of these into the front line if it is not controlled by the enemy. So how good is this card? Well, if the enemy does not have control of the front line, it's pretty solid. If you can have a Panzer F on board, and then you play Momentum, and you can attack face immediately with both of them, that's pretty good. Or you can just play Momentum to add 2 more tanks to the front lines to set up your Blitzkrieg on the following turn. Or you could just play Momentum to generate more value in a control mirror, where you're running low on cards, you play Momentum, your opponent can't kill them, and then you get 2 more Panzer Bs into your hand, and keep that, like, train of tanks going. So, if you control the front line, or the opponent doesn't control the front line, this card's pretty good. However, it does not read if the opponent controls the front line, summon these in the support line. It reads, add it to the front line if it is not controlled. Which means, if the front line is controlled, this is a 4-cost to do literally nothing. And when you're playing a Heinz deck, you don't really want to have a 4-cost do literally nothing. You can argue that if you lose control of the front line by turn 4, you've probably lost the game anyways. Which is kind of fair. However, how many copies of this would you really even want to run? I think if it was good, I think you'd run 1 or 2. And I don't think it's that good. I think it's just a little bit weak. I think it's just a little bit too weak to see play, because Heinz just has really good options. Heinz has no shortage of really good options you want to run in the deck, and I don't think Momentum makes the cut above anything else. So, unfortunately, I don't think this card's going to be too great. However, you can do like a full cheese Panzer B generating deck, just to maximize the potential of like your crazy pop-offs, and it's a fun card. So that's pretty cool. Then we have Attrition, a 2-cost US order. Deal 2 damage to a target unit. Retreat it also if it is Veteran. I don't know why retreat it also is the ordering of that sentence. However, 2-cost, deal 2 damage to target unit. Any line, not that great. I mean, you can compare it to Gunship Mission, you can compare it to United We Stand, you can compare it to Patrol. It's worse than all of those things in general. And then, how good is the additional effect? Because all of those other cards have additional effects, this one does too. Retreat it also if it is Veteran. How good is that effect? Well, from what we've seen so far, most Veteran cards are things that are going to be sticking in the support line. Like, we've seen a decent amount of Veteran fighters. There's the Panzer 1B, but this will just kill the Panzer 1B, so it's not going to be retreated. Then there's a bunch of, like, some pretty bad Veteran cards, like just slow infantries, I guess. So, like, if you targeted this on a slow infantry, it's pretty good. 2-cost, deal 2 damage, retreat it. However, if it's a big, slow infantry, that raises the question, why do you want a card that deals 2 damage to it? Because that's not going to kill it. Why wouldn't you just rather have a card that kills it? Like Torpedo Attack, if it's in the front line. And I don't think you're ever really going to want to retreat it into their hand, because then they just replay it. And you need to be playing a tempo deck to want to do that. And if you're playing a tempo deck, why aren't you just playing your regular half-tracks to retreat things? So this is just a really, really weird card. I mean, I feel like they wanted to have a lot of Veteran interaction, not just cards with Veteran, but cards that do stuff because of Veteran. Like the Soviet guy that deals 2 damage when when a unit becomes veteran, the British card that draws a card when a unit becomes veteran. Now Attrition. However, this card is just remarkably bad. And I believe, so there's a lot of questions on how veteran works with retreat. I believe because the veteran unit does not transform into a new unit, it essentially gets a new state. So it's similar to like getting a buff. It's just graphically represented slightly differently. So if you retreat a veteran unit to hand, it will go back to hand as the non-veteran version. So if you were to actually retreat a unit, you could retreat a unit to get rid of its veteran, return it to hand, they have to replay it, and then trigger the veteran again. However, depending on what it is, again, not that important, and like this kills Pathfinders as well. So like I feel like this just kills all of the best veteran cards. And like, so if you just play this for a 2-cost, deal 2 damage, there's better options. So Attrition, really unremarkable card. And then the last card from Brothers in Arms we're going to be looking at today is the Beriev BE4, a 3-cost Soviet plane, which is an elite. So what is this 3-cost Soviet elite? Well, the answer is it's a nerf to Heroes of the Soviet Union and absolutely nothing else, because it is a 1/4 body with the effect, your units cost 2 less to deploy. That seems really, really good. And then it has the effect, when you deploy a unit, retreat this unit. So you're spending 3 credits to get a 2-credit discount, and then return this to your hand. So you're spending 3 credits to lose a credit. Now obviously in the meantime you have a 1/4 body on the board, so you block bombers, I guess. Or they can just kill this, and then in that case you spend 3 credits for a 1/4 fighter, which is absolutely atrocious. But if they don't kill it, like, I'm just trying to imagine how you get value out of this. Now obviously you can play this on turn 3, and then on turn 4 you can play a 6-drop. However, there's like, what, KV? That's literally it. Like, you can cheat out an early KV with a 2-card combo that requires them to not kill a 1/4 fighter. And like, the other situation, I guess, is if they have bombers, but not enough bombers to kill Beriev, but just enough bombers that, like, they have 3 swordfish and no buffs, no damage, nothing. They just have 3 swordfish. You play Beriev, they attack and do it 3 times, drop it to a 1/1. You cheat out a KV and retreat it to your hand to re-heal and redeploy. Like, 99 times out of 100, you are literally playing this as a 3-card, like, a 3-credit, lose a credit card. Like, it is just so remarkably bad. Now, obviously, they're not just going to print a card this terrible with no support in the future. I think they probably intend to give this card support in the future. However, we have seen a lot of cards that were released with intentions of giving it support in the future, and then that support never came, and the cards were eventually reworked. So I would not be surprised if in like a year from now they rework Beriev to a completely different effect to make it playable. But in the meantime, this is just absolute trash. If you get this as your elite from the packs, you're going to be very disappointed, because this is by far the worst elite they have announced so far from this expansion. And it's a nerf to Heroes of the Soviet Union, which was easily one of the best, or easily the best, choose one of 3 elite cards. So, I mean, hey, it's a nerf to a very powerful card. Nice. But that brings us to the end of the Brothers in Arms cards. However, I'm just going to, in this video, I'm just going to quickly tack on a review to the newly released skirmish card, the Firemen F222. This is not part of the Brothers in Arms expansion. You will not open it in Brothers in Arms packs. It is technically part of the World at War set. It's just came out right now, so I'm going to give my thoughts on it while I'm reviewing other released cards, or newly upcoming cards. So Fireman is a 2-cost French bomber, 1/2 stats, 1 operation cost, with the text, when this unit deals damage to the enemy HQ, draw a card. So, it's a pretty solid bomber. 2-cost, 1/2 bomber. Obviously very low in stats, but it's a very powerful effect. Unfortunately, it can't really trigger immediately unless you blitz it, and how and why are you blitzing this? But if it could stick around on the board, it's an extra 2-cost bomber. So, if there was other support for, like, a French ally, Britain, France air deck, and also they weren't rotating Empire strikes, maybe this is like a tier 3 meme version of air, but none of that is true, so I'm pretty sure this card is just bad. It's sort of the French effect, where they release a card which is kind of interesting, and maybe could see play, if it wasn't French. because that requires being French ally, and what other French ally cards are you going to be playing in a deck that runs Firemen? So unfortunately, it's just a fun card, and at the moment, it is not going to fit into anything. However, it's not a terrible card by any means. So yeah, that brings us to the end of this slideshow, the cards that have been revealed so far, and I suspect there's going to be one more of these videos covering the last of the cards that are going to be announced over the next week, 2 weeks, and then expect a video discussing, once all the cards are announced, discussing what I think the meta is going to be when the expansion drops. And I might be doing that with a couple names you know around the community. I might do a bit of a roundtable thing where we all discuss what decks we're most looking forward to and what we expect the meta tier list to be like once the decks come out. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe if you are new to the channel, and join my Discord if you haven't already and you're interested in continuing this conversation with myself or other like-minded people. And with that, I will end the video here.